This podcast is part of the Michigan Sports and Entertainment Podcast Network. Go to michigansportsandentertainment.com for more great podcasts.
This is Mike.
And this is Beck.
And Nina.
And we are Brew Crime. So this episode we're going to do the theme of games crimes.
Yep.
And Nina, you're up first, so can you give us a hint of what your story's going to be about?
So I'm going to talk today about the Chessboard Killer. One of his famous quotes is, "Life without murder for me is like a life for you without food."
Perfect.
Disturbing.
Mike's going to talk about the beer, but I picked a beer called Parklife. Alexander Petushkin, Chessboard Killer, also known as the Pizza Park Maniac, killed all of his people within a park or inside the Pizza Park. So I thought it was kind of appropriate to talk about Parklife when this park was filled with death.
There's some interesting artwork on the can, actually.
Yeah, it's definitely... It's got like the bikes and the sailboats and skateboards, it looks like. Mm-hmm. It's got a ultimate frisbee, or not ultimate frisbee, sorry, frisbee golf hole.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of them. She's got a lot of ultimate frisbee golf holes on it. Mm-hmm. It looks like Parklife to me. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, their website doesn't have a lot to say about this beer. I was hoping for some kind of commercial description, but there isn't one. So we'll just go with it is a super cloudy kind of orange color with a white head. Kind of a subdued nose. Just a bit of passion fruit, a little tartness on the nose, but not a lot on the nose.
I like it.
It's got almost like an overripe passion fruit, a little bit of tartness in there, maybe a little bit of graininess, but it's not a huge beer, but it's really tasty. It's really refreshing. It's really nice on a hot day or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Perfect for a day out in the park. It's just tart enough to be refreshing.
Yeah. And it's only 4.5% alcohol, so you can drink a shit ton of these.
Yes.
It's nice. It's
from
nice.
Vancouver, Canada.
Yeah. It's cloudy, it's fruity, it's really nice. It's rather perfect beer for summers in Vancouver, actually.
Sure is.
When
fruity,
we get
refreshing, and a can is small enough to hide from the mounted police in Stanley Park.
Okay.
They don't care anyway.
Well said, though.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's get into it. So today I'm going to be talking about Alexander Yervechin Sasha Petushkin, born April 9th, 1974. So he's known as the Chessboard Killer and the Pizza Park Maniac. He's believed to have killed at least 48 people and up to 61 to 63 people in southwest Moscow's Pizza Park, where several of the victims' bodies were found. The Russian media wrote that Moscow was threatened by more than one serial killer because apart from the 12 dead women, some old people's bodies have been found at the Bitsevsky Park. The public was in the dark without knowing what was going on in the city that they lived in, and a man was playing chess, dying to win. Petushkin committed his first murder as a student in 1992 and stepped up his crimes in 2001. Russian media have speculated that Petushkin may have been motivated by a macabre competition with Russia's most notorious serial killer, Andrei Chikatilo, who was convicted in 1992 of killing 52 children and young women in 12 years.
Jeez.
Keep him busy up in Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Petushkin has said that his aim was to kill 64 people, the number of squares on a chessboard. He later recanted the statement, saying that he would have continued killing indefinitely had he not been stopped.
There's not that many pieces on the chessboard. Come on now.
Yeah, there's a documentary that I'll put a link to, or I'll send to Mike to add a link to, but he actually kept record on a chessboard, and each number of the victim, of how many he had filled, was just their name written. So that was his kind of trophy keeping. It's really fascinating. Petushkin targeted primarily elderly homeless men by luring them with the offer of free vodka. After drinking with them, he would kill them with repeated blows to the head with a hammer.
That is so Russia.
Yeah. Mother Russia.
Yes.
In what became his trademark or signature, he would then push a vodka bottle in the gaping wound in their skulls.
Oh, dear.
Holy shit.
He also targeted younger men, children, and women. He would always attack from behind in order to take the victim by surprise and to avoid spilling blood on his own clothes. Something that was really unique with Petrushkin is that usually police will look for similar victim types. So you'll have where they're picking women, maybe around the same age or same appearance, or men or children. Petrushkin really stood out and was kind of hard to pinpoint because he didn't discriminate on his victim. It's just whoever he could get, he would kill. I think that makes him probably one of the scariest kind of killers because he's just doing it for the sake of killing.
And there's no way to profile him, yeah.
No. And that's why they weren't able to tie this many victims together, that it's one person. And I found that interesting as well because with his signature of the vodka bottle through the head, how do you not think that that's a similarity? How common is that? It can't be.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, if that is something that you don't see as a common occurrence through these crimes, then it's like, ooh.
Yeah.
What's wrong with the neighborhood if this is so common that it's not a link?
Yeah.
A lot of the victims that Petrushkin had were homeless men as well, so they didn't necessarily have families or people who would be looking for them. And, I mean, I don't want to make an assumption, but if homelessness was viewed as a problem, having less of these people around may have not been so worrisome.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it wasn't something to draw their attention to the problem.
Doesn't matter what country you're in, that seems to be the case with most police and
People's
just in
opinions.
general, people's opinions. You just got to look at the Picton case here or the Bruce MacArthur case in Ontario. It's you pick a certain group that the authorities don't care about, and people will go missing, and no one will notice.
Petrushkin claimed that while killing people, he felt like God, as he decided whether his victims should live or die. To quote him, as I said earlier, "For me, life without killing is like life without food for you." He once said, "I feel like the father of all of these people, since it was I who opened the door for them to another world."
What door?
The death
You hit
door.
them with a hammer, you fucking idiot.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
That's not a door.
But it's a door to another life, an afterlife. I mean, I'm not.
I know.
I'm
I
not disagreeing with
know.
that. This is complete BS, but it is what it is. Experts at the Serbsky Institute, which is Russia's main psychiatric clinic, have found Petrushkin irrecuperable.
Nope.
I knew I wasn't going to make that word. Irrecuperable. For those who don't know what that means, which includes everyone sitting here, I have Googled it. It means not able to be recovered or remedied. And then they just repeat the word that I can't pronounce. So there it is.
What was it again? Do you remember what it was? Irrecuperable?
Irrecuperable.
There we go.
Irrecuperable.
Okay, I'm glad we got that out of
Thank you, Janice.
the way. Glad we got that out of the way. So according to the documentary Serial Killers, Petrushkin, once apprehended, led police officers to the scenes of many of his crimes in Pizza Park. He demonstrated a keen recollection of how the murders were committed, acting them out in great detail, which has been committed to film. I'll include the YouTube link for the documentary so you guys can have a peek. He also revealed that a number of the murders he committed were not done in his preferred method, which is a hammer blows to the back of the head. Some victims he just threw down into sewers.
Wow.
Yep.
How did they die from being put in a sewer?
So the sewers is waste sewers. So they would go under, drown, and get pulled under.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a horrible
None of them knew
death.
how to swim.
Well, you can't because you're drowning. I don't think it's so much the swimming part. There's just no breathing once you're down there.
Once you're through the culvert, and if you're in the pipe, there's nowhere to go because you're
Oh, because it's full.
Right.
I
Of
got you.
poop.
likely full. And even if not, you would...
That's worse. I'd rather get hit in the head with a hammer.
Even if you didn't drown, you'd probably suffocate because of
Exactly.
the enclosed
Fumes.
space and the fumes, the gases.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you'd probably just choke to death on that.
Hammer.
And something that I found really interesting in the documentary, he actually gave the police quite a bit of shit for not catching him sooner because he didn't understand how they couldn't connect it when he had such a distinct signature. And he thought especially the people in the sewers, because they would just turn up. How do you find all these dead bodies and not do some kind of investigation? Mm-hmm. So that was kind of interesting. How Pichushkin ended up being caught was his last victim was Marina Moshkalyova in the summer of 2006. She had disappeared. I believe she had left a note for her son of just a phone number of a friend that she was meeting. And she had written Sasha, which is what Pichushkin went by. Mm-hmm. And they were able to find him. And then also in her jacket, a metro ticket was also found in her possession where her body was found. Because of the timestamp, they were able to bring up footage of surveillance tapes of the Moscow metro system and actually saw him walking with Pichushkin. Mm-hmm. So he was then arrested on June 15th in 2006 and convicted on October 24th in 2007 of 48 murders and 3 attempted murders. He asked a Russian court to add an additional 11 victims to his body count, bringing his claimed death toll to 60, with 3 surviving victims.
Wow.
Completely insane.
Was there a pattern to how he chose these victims? Because it just seems like if you knew him, you were screwed, basically.
Yes, yeah, so relentless, nothing.
Just knowing him at all.
Yeah. He started getting more brazen closer to the end, where he was actually meeting the victims. And, for example, with the last victim, Marina, it was more of like my understanding was it was like a date that they were going out on.
Jeez.
It's scary.
It is.
So you can have the date, or you just wrong place, wrong time. He just sees you in the park at night. Yeah, it was really crazy watching the documentary of him just taking all the police officers to the different scenes, and you can actually see in the documentary that a couple of the burial sites that he brings them to, that there's bones, human bones. So as he was walking them through, they were discovering more victims that he had killed that hadn't even been found, because through decomposition of the bodies, it was literally just pieces of skulls left and things like that.
Mm-hmm. So it wasn't even like he was trying.
No, he was just like, yeah, this person was over here, so he walked them over to the bush, and then their skeletal remains. During the trial, he was housed in a glass cage. It took Judge Vladimir Usov an hour to read the verdict. Life in prison, with the first 15 years to be spent in solitary confinement.
Holy shit.
That is so
Holy
crazy.
Shit.
Yep. Capital punishment in Russia has been abolished in practice due to a moratorium established in 1996. Russia has not executed anyone for 11 years, but the Pichushkin case has seen calls for the death penalty to be brought back.
Wait. Russia
Doesn't
abolished the death penalty, but the United States still murders their own people. Mm-hmm. Wow.
Okay, but
Wow.
But if you were him, hypothetically, would you take the death penalty or 15 years of solitary confinement?
that is crazy.
That is fucking
They've
intense.
proven that solitary confinement destroys your mind.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
It is terrible. But I'm still amazed that Russia has abolished the death penalty and the U.S. hasn't. Because Russia is not one of the more progressive countries with a lot of things. So I'm amazed they aren't still whacking their own people.
Yeah, I know. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 15 years solitary confinement. Holy shit.
If he wasn't nuts before, he'll be nuts after.
Now.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I think it's probably the best for him and whoever he's around. I mean, if he didn't discriminate on victims, I couldn't see him being put in general population, because if life for him is murdering people, what's to say he won't do that when he's in jail as well?
I would say it's not best for him. It's best for everyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah, but both, really. Because if he's that messed up in general public, how long is he going to last, really?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Either way.
Also, I guess as a fun fact, he met a woman while in jail through correspondence.
Of course he did.
She's Siberian. She works in a children's shop.
Oh.
And she calls herself Natalia Pichushkin. They're not married yet. And one quote that she is kind of known for saying is that she's always going to be there for her maniac.
It's not even like she wants to try to change him or whatever, like a lot of people do. No. My maniac.
Yep. There was also an interview that Pichushkin had done with Yasha Levin. The interview was called The Exile. And what he had done, he asked Pichushkin just what his thoughts are on kind of different topics. And I picked 2 out. that I just wanted to share with you guys. So one of the topics is on literature. And to quote him, he says, "Of course I don't write. Only devki, which is girls, write. Journalists too, I suppose." So that's why it's not a thing. And another one is on forgiveness. So to quote him, "No, I do not regret it. So much strength and time spent. Repent, I do not repent. This is again a done formality. It will not change my sentence. Since I was young, I dreamed. Everything was different back then, and it all turned out the way I wanted it to. I know that they had me nailed when they started pressing me about 12 victims, but then they were also surprised that I'd actually killed closer to 60. I watched a show about me on TV. Dennis, my classmate, told the camera, when we learned that he had committed these crimes, it was a shock. Others said I was a rare case, killing just for the sake of killing. There is no motivation, neither race, nor sex, nor religion. Even someone wrote, Pichushkin himself doesn't know yet the history of criminology changed, that I didn't account for someone such as him, that he will go on down in history forever." So that's what I have on the Chessboard Killer.
What a maniac.
Oh.
What a monster.
Yeah.
As much as I would never give these pieces of garbage any sort of points in any way, at least he's not one of those that don't take responsibility. He's really like, nope, I did this. And this is where I should be.
Yep. In solitary confinement for 15 years, life sentence, multiple life sentences. I don't know. I thought it was also pretty ballsy that he, while walking the police through the park and just kind of like finding the other bodies that were there and like recounting it for them, just being like, how did you guys not figure this out before?
Yeah.
I mean,
well, but I mean that, to be blunt about it, he's getting off on that, right?
absolutely. It was really chilling to see when he's, because it was all documented and recorded on video, but when he's brought to the courthouse and he's in that kind of like glass cage, and it's like he's in the moment, like this is his thing, and he's like pacing, walking around, looking at people, like very like nonchalant. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
I've never understood Russia's caging the offender in the courtroom.
But it's for the protection of both, so that the families don't attack him and vice versa.
Yeah, but it just, you shouldn't need that. You just keep them friggin' separated. I don't
They
know.
do that here too.
Yeah.
I've never seen them in a cage. They're always just sitting down. Maybe they might be handcuffed.
No, I've seen it here.
Really? I've never seen
in
it.
like, I mean, if it's a particularly volatile case, they'll have them in a bulletproof
Closed off area.
box, for lack of
Really?
a better word. But it's no different than like the section that a jury would sit in, except that it's bulletproof.
I've never seen that.
Yeah, the courthouses in Vancouver downtown. So I went there to just shadow some cases, and on the criminal cases, they had the offenders sitting inside.
I've seen that as well in Ottawa.
Weird. Never seen that. Okay, I'll have to look that up.
Yep. Cool. Well, that's everything that I got for you guys.
All right.
Wow.
Hey, this is Mike of Brew Crime. Have you heard of the newish podcast app Podcoin yet? This is the first podcast app that will actually pay you to listen to your favorite podcasts. You can find this podcast app on Android and iPhone, and not only is it free, but it's simple and easy to use. Even if you've had a few too many brews, listen to this podcast. While listening to episodes, you gain Podcoins that can be used to buy gift cards or even be donated to charity. So either give to a good cause or get gift cards for places like Amazon or Starbucks. It only makes sense to make some cash tuning into podcasts, because time is money after all. If you use the invite code BrewCrime, you can even earn 300 bonus Podcoins just for signing up. So head over to your app store and give Podcoin a try. You won't regret it.
Life is not a game, but it was for the Scorecard Killer. Starting in the early 70s, someone was leaving the bodies of young men beside freeway off-ramps. To make matters worse, they were keeping a coded tally. So for this episode, I've chosen one sailing weight, which I originally chose because of the propensity for the killer's victims to be Marines. So sailing.
Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. But also because I wanted to try this beer.
Yeah, that's a great reason.
Yeah. And I will let Mike, the professional, tell us about the beer.
I didn't know we can do that. We can just choose a beer because you want to drink it.
Well, there's a slight tie-in still.
Why not?
Huh.
So this is actually a brewery from Gibsons, which is on the Sunshine Coast. On the bottle, it just says Tapworks Brewing Company, but it's Gibsons Tapworks. So I'm not sure why they've removed that from the bottle. This is the one selling weight India Pale Ale. It's 6.9% alcohol, 54 IBU. And it says a citrus-forward IPA with plenty of aromatics. One sailing weight is light in color, crisp, and refreshing. Pairs well with setting up camping chairs in the sun.
Which sounds amazing to me. And it should be lighter, Nina. So, hopefully.
Still an IPA, so it's probably going to be...
But...
Yeah, but it is cloudy, so yeah, it'll be a little easier drinking probably than a West Coast. So this one's pretty darn murky orange. It's got a white head on it. Got some definite hop aroma, like just some sort of vegetable hop aromas going on there. Some grapefruit, sort of general citrusy notes. And there's some graininess to it.
It's nice. I like it, actually. I mean, that sounded surprised, but I'm not surprised. I like a cloudy.
Yeah. Actually, this is a really dank, on the flavor, really dank. It's kind of tastes like pot or something.
What?
Marijuana and hops are the same family of plants. And you get the flavors and stuff from the oils. So it's a very, it's not skunky, but it's got a very dank flavor. Think pot.
I don't know.
But then it's got lots of grapefruit and maybe even lemon going in there. Some citrus pith. Not a lot of bitterness, but there is some malt in the background. It's nice.
I like it.
Wow.
Wow.
That doesn't happen very often.
No, I like it. I can actually drink this one.
There's a tiny bit left in the bottle if you want it.
Mm-hmm. I will probably take the rest of that, and you can have maybe this.
Okay. Alrighty. Let's get into the story then.
Randy Stephen Kraft, of course he has 3 names, was born in Long Beach, California, March 19, 1945. He was the youngest of 4 children. His parents, Opal and Harold, moved to California from Wyoming when World War II started. Randy's mother did everything that she could for her children. She worked hard to supplement her husband's income so that her kids would want for nothing. The same could not be said for Randy's father. He was distant and rarely attended social functions with his kids. Randy was doted on by his 3 sisters and his mom. It is also said that he was more than a little accident-prone. If the True Crime All the Time guys have taught me anything, this mention of him being accident-prone means that as a child, Randy hit his head.
Yep.
In the mid to late 50s, Randy was noted for his intelligence at his school. By 1957, he was moved to accelerated classes at junior high. By high school, Randy was a solid Republican. He wasn't only interested in politics. He had dreams of being a U.S. Senator. He started the Westminster World Affairs Club with 2 of his friends and frequently got A's in school. He occasionally dated girls, but many suspected that he was gay.
That never happens.
No. Nobody ever...
Especially back then.
Yeah, no one ever fakes that in high school. Definitely took a gay friend of mine to prom. Whatever.
I'm sure you had a great time anyways.
Of course we did. No one knows how to dance like a gay guy knows how to dance. Randy wouldn't admit this until much later, although he knew by high school that he was attracted to men. That's sad, though. It's so something that he would have been expected to hide.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, Randy graduated 10th out of 390 students in his high school and went on to Claremont Men's College for a Bachelor of Arts degree in economics. While still at the beginning of his college career, Randy joined the Claremont Reserve Officers Training Corps. He also frequented political demonstrations supporting the Vietnam War. Mm-hmm.
People did that? Wow.
Yeah. Apparently. Very popular. He also supported Barry Goldwater as the 1964 presidential candidate. All of this was really his last attempts at being what his parents wanted him to be. a nice, conservative, heteronormative son.
Oh.
Blech.
Yeah.
Right?
100%.
Not sure what half those words meant. Like, yeah, if you guys are disagreeing, me too.
No. They just wanted him to be this, like, I want a wife and a white picket fence, and I want white males to lead the country all the time.
Golden
white
retriever,
males and
gold on the porch together kind of thing? Okay.
things should remain as they are all the time, and women shouldn't have the vote, and gays are horrible, and that's what his parents expected.
Well, are they in for a rude awakening?
Quite. Quite. So by Randy's second year at college, it was quite different. For starters, he had his first gay relationship, and he also started working at the Garden Grove Cocktail Lounge as a bartender. So Garden Grove catered to the local gay community, and Randy would regularly go to Laguna and Huntington Beach for casual sex. This is the Cue Nina, you do you part of our segment.
Do you, boo-boo.
There it is. So around this time, Randy also started trying to tell his family that he was gay by bringing his, quote, friends home to meet his parents and sisters, but they were super oblivious.
They probably just didn't want to believe it, so they just, like, oh, just a friend, yeah.
Exactly. Oh, you guys are friends, isn't that nice? Your friend didn't have plans, and 2 years later, he was arrested for lewd conduct after propositioning an undercover officer in Huntington Beach. Since he had no previous record, they decided not to charge him, but by 1967, Randy was a strong supporter of the left-wing politics, and he had re-registered as a Democrat. He quickly became a party organizer and worked tirelessly for the election of Robert Kennedy. Unfortunately, by his senior year, his focus was most definitely not in academics. He was drinking, doing drugs, and attending all-night parties. He should have graduated in June of 1967, but because he had to redo his economics class, he didn't graduate until February of 1968. But it's like, college isn't about finding yourself.
Yeah.
What is it about? Yep. Right? So a mere 4 months later, he joined the Air Force. He went to boot camp in Texas before being stationed at Edwards Air Force Base. There he had the thrilling job of supervising the painting of test planes.
Oh my god.
I know, right? So exciting. So exciting.
I'm sure he did a great job painting them, though. Or supervising.
Well, I mean,
how is that even a job?
I know. They literally paid him to watch someone else paint.
Yes.
And then he sat there while the paint dried. That's what he got paid for. It's not the worst job ever.
No.
It's boring as shit, though.
Yeah.
Watching paint dry, literally?
Literally, he watched paint dry.
No wonder he turned into a psycho.
Contributing factor, but maybe not the main event.
Fair.
He would eventually become airman first class and supervisor manager, because if anything proves that you're managerial material, it's being able to sit there and watch paint dry, right?
Definitely.
So nothing says I can be in charge of lots of people than watching paint dry. Anyway, that same year, he finally told his family that he was gay. His father was enraged, and his mother was not thrilled, but at least she was a little understanding. Ultimately, his family accepted his sexuality, but later noted that after he had come out, he also started to distance himself from the family.
It's interesting.
Thanks to the perfectly legal bigotry in the U.S. military at the time, Randy received a general discharge from the Air Force after his superiors found out that he was gay.
What a joke.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's bullshit.
Although officially he was released on, quote, medical grounds. I guess it makes sense, though, since being gay was listed as a mental disorder until 1987. Yeah, that's right, 1987. It was listed as a medical disorder in the States.
Doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, Randy attempted to fight against the discharge, but as there was nothing to protect gay people in the military, at the time he was out of luck. He moved back in with his parents and started working as a bartender. In March of 1970, Randy encountered a 13-year-old Westminster youth named Joey Fancher at Huntington Beach. Joey explained to Kraft that he had run away from home that same day. In response, Randy invited Joey to live in his apartment with him. Joey agreed, but upon arriving, he was drugged and assaulted.
Oh, shit.
Hours later, Randy had to leave for work, and while he was gone, Joey escaped. Someone nearby saw Joey in a confused and sickened state, so they called an ambulance. He had to have his stomach pumped because of all the drugs that Randy had given him. While he was still at the hospital, he told the police that Randy had given him drugs and beaten him. He didn't tell them or his parents that he had been sexually assaulted. Police searched Randy's apartment with permission from his roommate. Unfortunately, since they didn't have a search warrant and Joey had admitted to taking the pills voluntarily, Randy was never charged with anything.
What?
Even though this boy was 13 years old.
That sounds very similar to what happened with Dahmer.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
It's so similar.
Mm-hmm.
By 1971, Randy was working as a forklift driver in Huntington Beach. He also enrolled in the teaching program at Long Beach State University. There he met Jeff Graves, a fellow student, and they began a relationship. As if he wasn't busy enough already, this was also the year that he started killing people. Specifically, males between the ages of 13 and 35. Between 1971 and 1983, Kraft is believed to have killed a total of 67 victims, or over 100 victims, depending on which source you believe.
Wow.
He also kept what was later referred to as a scorecard of his victims. On the scorecard, he gave his victims code names. Often this was their initials, but sometimes it was a word or phrase that reminded him of the event. I decided to just talk about the 16 that he was actually tried for and the first suspected killing, even though it wasn't one that he was actually tried for. The first victim was 30-year-old Wayne Duquette. He bartended at a gay bar called The Stable in Sunset Beach. Last seen alive on September 20, 1971, he was found naked on October 5th, 1971, near the Ortega Highway. Because of the 3 weeks that he was outside, it was very difficult to find any signs of foul play. Cause of death was listed as acute alcohol poisoning. I mean, if I was any member of his family, I would have been pissed off about this, because you don't end up beside the highway in the middle of nowhere with no clothes at all, and your cause of death is alcohol poisoning?
Very rarely would it be.
Right? Like,
I would say never, because I'm sure it's happened.
Right.
But very rarely.
Right.
No, there's way too many extenuating circumstances to just get butt naked and pass out. Was there
in
any
the middle
alcohol
of
around?
nowhere.
Was there alcohol around him or anything?
No.
I'm curious of when they tested the blood alcohol level. He must have had. He had to have cans with him or whatever he was drinking.
Well, the amount of alcohol that was recorded in his body at the time of death was really high. But even still, too, how would he have gotten so shit-faced that he was completely naked, but also still able to get to the middle of nowhere without it being weird at all? Without someone having left him there.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Someone must have just dumped his body.
Exactly.
Out of a moving car.
Exactly.
That's what I feel.
Mm-hmm. So, for this death, Randy had written the word stable on his scorecard. Without the scorecard, investigators never would have connected Randy to this particular murder, but because Wayne had worked at the bar called Stable...
Yeah, it totally makes sense then, yeah.
Yeah. It was a logical conclusion. 15 months later, Randy killed Edward Moore. He was a 20-year-old Marine, last seen alive leaving the Camp Pendleton barracks December 24th, 1972. He was found beside the 405 freeway in Seal Beach early on December 26th. He had been bound about the wrists and ankles, then beaten in the face with a blunt instrument before being garroted.
Jeez.
For being what?
Garroted or corroded?
Corroded, yeah.
What is that?
Sorry.
It's a wire that you pull against someone's neck to choke them out.
Oh, okay.
Right.
I've seen a lot of spy movies.
He had then been pushed out of a moving vehicle. The autopsy also revealed numerous bite marks and a sock that had been forced into his rectum.
Put a sock in it.
That's a weird spot to put a sock. Jeez.
Yeah, we'll get to the reasoning behind that later.
Oh.
On April 9th, 1973, the body of 17-year-old Kevin Bailey was found beside a road in Huntington Beach. 5 days earlier, he had been arrested and fingerprinted in Oregon for loitering near a school. He had been emasculated and sodomized. I wasn't positive what emasculated was, and I kind of wish I hadn't looked it up because it is the removal of the penis and testicles of a human male.
Oh.
Horrifically, this had been done before he was murdered. Yep.
Yeah, no, that's not good.
A few months later, on July 28th, 1973, 20-year-old Ronnie Weeb went missing. He was found just 2 days later, strangled to death, beside an on-ramp to the 405 freeway. Marks on his ankles and wrists led investigators to believe that he had been bound and suspended from a device before he was murdered. By the beginning of 1975, there were 14 victims that investigators suspected all belonged to the same killer. All the victims were Caucasian males with similar physical characteristics. On January 24th, 1975, homicide investigators from across Southern California gathered in Orange County to discuss their progress. An FBI profile was shared that read as follows, quote, "The individual is a methodical, organized lust killer of above-average intelligence who exhibits an indifference to the interests and welfare of society." It was also proposed that the killer likely had a military background. The reasoning was that 2 of the victims had tissue paper residue in their noses, which was a known military procedure to prevent the body from purging post-mortem. It was further theorized that could be the reasoning for the placing of the socks, etc.
Yeah, that makes sense then.
Yeah, in the rectums of the victim. It was just to prevent purging of the body.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
It was just, to prevent the purging from where they were killed to where they were found. Unfortunately, this meeting did not reveal any solid suspects. On March 29th, 1975, Randy lured Keith Crotwell and Kent May into his Ford Mustang. They were plied with beer and Valium as Randy drove aimlessly around Belmont Shore and Seal Beach. Kent later recalled feeling catatonic before passing out from the beer and the Valium. Randy drove back to the parking lot where he had picked them up, abruptly stopped, and pushed Kent out of the backseat of the car. He was unconscious but unharmed. He then sped away. This was all witnessed by 2 of their friends that were still at the parking lot. They also saw that Keith was slumped against the driver's shoulder. On May 8, Keith's skull was found in a jetty near the Long Beach Marina. When the 2 friends that had stayed in the parking lot heard the news, they remembered the black and white Mustang. They scoured the neighborhood looking for it. They found it less than 1 mile from their home and gave the police the license plate number. It was quickly traced back to Randy. On May 19, 1975, Long Beach police questioned Randy about Keith's abduction and murder. Randy denied ever meeting Keith or Kent, but when police brought him in for further questioning, his story changed.
Of course it did.
Of course it did, right? He said that around March 29th, 1975, he'd picked them up and given them beer and Valium. He later dropped Kent off at the parking lot and continued on to a side road near the El Toro off-ramp with Keith. His car got stuck in the embankment, so he left Keith there to watch the car while he walked to a gas station to call a tow truck. When he got back, Keith had just disappeared.
As one does.
Yeah, just poof. Mm-hmm. Gone. He just wasn't there. Seems likely.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Randy's roommate confirmed that Randy had called him that day saying his vehicle was stuck, but this was still not enough to convince the investigators. Two of them went ahead the next week to file charges against Randy Kraft. Awesome, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's finally being caught, and these horrible crimes will come to an end.
I sense some sarcasm.
Yeah, so do I.
Mm-hmm. The Los Angeles DA's office dismissed the charges because the coroner had deemed Keith's death as accidental drowning.
In what?
Not sure how we could have got that.
Yeah, no shit.
As the only part of the body they'd found at the time was his skull. But the coroner decided that it was accidental drowning. That's right. At this point, we are still 6 months away from his body being found. But somehow the coroner has decided that it was accidental drowning.
Of course.
How does your head pop off if you drown?
Yeah.
Not just pop off. How does everything disappear except for the skull?
Right?
And he wasn't found in a body of water or anything, right? Like, where was the head located?
It was in a jetty, which is like it's like a bay, but it's much smaller.
Oh, okay.
So it's like a very small inlet.
Okay.
But even still, how do you decide that someone has drowned based just on having their skull?
And how did the head get detached from the body?
Right? Like wouldn't you see some sort of
Cuts.
mark or something?
That's annoying.
Anyway, yeah, so we're still 6 months away from the body being found. But keep this in mind for the rest of the victims that I talk about. If they hadn't pressed charges against him at this point, think about what could have been avoided.
Yeah.
The following was the most heinous act of the 16, so skip ahead if you don't want to hear it, or at the very least, I hope that you aren't listening to this during your sleepy time. On December 31st, 1975, Randy abducted 22-year-old Mark Hall in San Juan Capistrano and drove him to a remote canyon where he was bound to a tree. He was then sodomized and emasculated. His severed genitals were inserted into his rectum. His nose, cheeks, chest, and scrotum were burned with a cigarette lighter, as were his eyes. The autopsy indicated that this poor man was alive for much of these horrific acts.
Oh.
Yeah.
The cause of death was asphyxiation.
Oh, drowning? Not drowning this time?
No. The coroner found earth and leaves lodged deep into the trachea. So he had shoved leaves and dirt into his throat until basically he drowned.
Wow. So he did drown, basically.
Kind of, yeah. He's a fucking monster.
Yeah.
By 1976, Randy and Jeff's relationship was over. Randy quickly moved on to his next relationship. His new boyfriend's name was Jeff Seelig. This Jeff was an apprentice baker who was only 19 years old. They soon moved to Laguna Hills. Their relationship was better described as monogamish.
Monogamish.
Rather than monogamous. But both considered it permanent. Jeff later told investigators that they would go out together quite often to pick up a third for a threesome. Jeff was adamant that Randy was never violent with him or with any of their partners. It's commonly believed that it was this relationship that caused a lull in the murders. He didn't kill again until December 10th, 1976, but was never charged with this murder as the body of Paul Fuchs was never found. His name is clearly listed on the scorecard, though. He didn't even give this guy a code name. He put his actual name on the scorecard.
That's crazy.
So actually, a picture of Randy and the scorecard will be available on the website. April 16th, 1978 was the start of a busy spring/summer for Randy. That night he abducted Scott Michael Hughes. He was a Marine who was only 18 years old at the time of his death. Randy plied him with Valium and removed one of his testicles before strangling him to death with a ligature. He then left Scott's body fully clothed this time, but missing his shoelaces, beside a freeway on-ramp in Anaheim. On June 11th, the body of 23-year-old Roland Young was found near a San Diego freeway. Roland was emasculated and then stabbed to death. He also had abrasions on his body which suggested he had been thrown from a vehicle while moving at a high speed. Well, 8 days later, another young Marine was found beside a road in Moulton Parkway. He was 20-year-old Richard Keith. He had been given flurazepam and alcohol. It wasn't clear if both or neither were by choice. Flurazepam is used to treat symptoms of insomnia, like trouble falling asleep or trouble staying asleep. Richard had been bound before being strangled. The mixture of drugs and alcohol also caused frothing at the mouth, so on top of being strangled, he had also drowned, basically drowned on his own saliva. On July 6th, Randy picked up a hitchhiker named Keith Klingbeil. He was 23 at the time. Keith was discovered barely alive beside Interstate 5 freeway. He had a large amount of paracetamol, a very mild pain reliever, and alcohol in his system. He had been strangled with his own shoelaces, and his left nipple had been burnt with a car lighter. He was rushed to Mission Community Hospital, but died shortly after arriving. There was a 4-month respite before Randy struck again. The castrated body of Michael Inderbeaton was found on November 18th beside the San Diego freeway. He was a 21-year-old truck driver from Long Beach. His autopsy revealed that he had burn wounds similar to those of Mark Hall, and that he had been violated with a foreign object before being suffocated. There was a further break from the murders until June 16, 1979. That day, Randy abducted another Marine. This time it was 20-year-old Donald Crisell. His wounds indicated that he had been tied up with rope and burned on parts of his body. Furthermore, his body was thrown from a moving vehicle onto the 405 freeway. I don't understand how, but his death was listed as acute alcohol poisoning.
What?
Yeah.
Yes.
In spite of the wounds that were obvious that he
Was tortured.
had been burnt
Yeah.
and thrown from a moving vehicle, they listed his death as acute alcohol poisoning.
This reminds me of so many cases. It sounds like it's because it's the gay community. They don't want to deal with it. So, what can we do? Alcohol poisoning. No one will question that.
Yeah.
Were all of his victims known gay men, or was he, like, how was he picking them?
It's not even that they were known gay men, but it was more like if he picked someone up, like he picked up a lot of young Marines who were probably like, it was their first time being out alone. They probably just wanted to go party, and he had drugs, and he had alcohol. And, I mean, they didn't know.
Yeah.
Fucking 18 years old, and you're a Marine? You don't know anything.
No, you're a child.
You're a child. So, There was one more death around this time that I wanted to mention, even though he wasn't actually charged with this death. But September 14th, 1979, 20-year-old Gregory Wallace Jolie's body was found in Lake Arrowhead. He had been emasculated and his head and legs were severed after he was killed.
Ugh.
Or at least after.
Yeah, I guess. I didn't understand how no charges were brought against him on this case because some of Gregory's personal possessions were later found in Randy's home. And it was still no charges were brought against him.
How does that work?
I don't know. I don't understand it.
Yeah,
Which is why I wanted to mention it. I didn't understand. So on September 3rd, 1980, a still bound body was found near the El Toro Marine Air Base in a trash bag. It was 19-year-old Marine Robert Loggins. He was last seen alive August 23rd. Photographs, along with their negatives, were later found in Randy's possession. They depicted Robert inebriated and slumped over on Randy's couch. In subsequent photos, he was in various nude and pornographic postures. His eyes are closed in all of the pictures, so we can't be sure if he was intoxicated or dead at this point.
Jeez.
Eric Church was last seen January 26, 1983, while hitchhiking to Sacramento from Orange County. Randy abducted the 20-year-old the following day and murdered him. His body was found beside I-605. The autopsy revealed that he had ingested large amounts of Valium and alcohol, been bound with rope and sodomized. The cause of death was ligature, strangulation, and blows to the head with a blunt instrument.
Also known as alcohol poisoning or drowning. But jeez.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Only 2.5 weeks later, on February 12th, Randy killed two Buena Park men, 18-year-old Jeffrey Nelson and 20-year-old Roger Duvall. Shortly after midnight, they had told their friend Bryce Wilson that they were going to get some food. Jeffrey's body was found nude beside a Garden Grove freeway off-ramp several hours later. He was emasculated, strangled, and thrown from a moving vehicle. The following day, Roger's body was found near Mount Baldy in San Bernardino County. He had ingested alcohol and propylphenol, was bound and sodomized, and strangled with a cord. May 14, 1983, at 1:10 a.m., a Toyota Celica made an illegal lane change that was observed by two California Highway Patrol officers. They signaled the driver to stop as they suspected he was drunk. The driver stopped and, while exiting the car, dumped the open beer that was on his lap onto the ground.
And this is how he gets caught?
Just listen.
Just wait.
Officer Michael Sterling observed that the driver, Randy Kraft's jeans, were unbuttoned. Needless to say, the sobriety test didn't go so well.
Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
As this was happening, the second officer, Sergeant Michael Howard, noticed that the passenger was slumped against the window, so he went to wake him up. When he shook the man's arm to wake him, he realized they was not exactly warm to the touch. He checked his pulse, but there was none to be found. He also saw clearly visible ligature marks on the man's neck. When he removed the jacket from the man's lap, it revealed that his hands were bound with shoelaces and that his pants were open, exposing his genitalia. The man was identified as Terry Lee Gambrell. He was a 25-year-old Marine from the El Toro Air Base. Randy was quickly arrested for driving under the influence. Investigators went to work on a thorough search of his car. They quickly found a belt that matched the marks on Terry's neck. They also found a lot of incriminating things that didn't fit with this case, such as alcohol, tranquilizers, various prescription drugs, and a lot of bloodstains. Forensic analysis confirmed the blood was human. Investigators found an envelope under the carpet with over 50 pictures of young men in pornographic poses. Many of the men appeared to be asleep or dead. The aforementioned scorecard was found in the trunk. There's a picture of it as well as Randy himself on the website, and he looks like a smug motherfucker. I'm going to show you guys the picture now, and you can see his smug fucking grin.
Yeah,
Here's what he looks like.
He looks like a smug motherfucker for sure.
Piece of garbage. Investigators found clothes and personal possessions of many murder victims from the last decade in Randy's home. The fibers from his rug were matched to unknown fibers found on Scott Hughes, and his couch was identical to the one in the photo of Robert Loggins. On May 16th, 1983, Randy was officially charged with the murder of Terry Lee Gambrell. By September, he was charged with an additional 15 murders, as well as one charge of emasculation and 2 of sodomy. The scorecard that Randy Kraft is known for is a neatly printed list of 61 code words. Each entry is believed to represent at least one victim, but in at least 4 cases, it represents 2 victims. Such is the case for code word, quote, 2 in 1 beach, which is believed to represent Jeffrey Nelson and Roger Duvall. .co.com has a spreadsheet of the list that includes the victim's identity and some details of the case. It is available on our website, or you can visit their website. Some examples are as simple as the victim's initials or where they were left, but some pertain to what actually happened, more so than whom it happened to. Such as, quote, Marine Head BP. This refers to Mark Marsh. He was a Marine found decapitated. He was last seen hitchhiking to Buena Park. So, Marine Head, Buena Park. Marine Head BP. Investigators say that Eric Church and Terry Gambrell are not listed on the scorecard. In Eric's case, it is possible they just don't know which code word is his, and in Terry's case, it is very likely that Randy was arrested before he had a chance to update his scorecard.
Yeah, usually you would do the scorecard after the kill, and if he was still driving his kill, then...
Exactly.
Yeah.
He hadn't disposed of the body at the time. So, at the time of his conviction, 23 of his estimated 67 victims were unidentified. The fact that the murders happened in a few different states greatly hindered an identification, and in March of 2012, one of the victims was identified as 18-year-old Marine Oral Alfred Stewart, Jr. His body had been found November 10th, 1974. It's 38 years
That's fucking
before
horrifying.
they'd identified him. Like, that poor family waited for so long for the answer. But because the states weren't sharing their identification processes or whatever, it wasn't until they had a multi-state
Database.
Thank you. Yes. That he was finally identified, but it took 38 years.
That's horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's how so many of the serial killers back in the day in the States were getting away with it, because from one county to county, one state to state, they weren't sharing anything.
Exactly.
So you're literally driving an hour out and traveling, which most people did do during that time, and they just weren't being linked solely because there's no shared database of any of them.
Exactly. It's horrible. So, Randy's trial began September 26, 1988 in Orange County before Judge Donald A. McCartan. All of the evidence found in his car and his home was used at trial, as were his gas receipts, and that placed him in locations where men had been abducted or where their bodies had been found, and eventually there were over 1,000 exhibits, like over 1,000 pieces of evidence in the trial, and over 160 witnesses to the crime.
Did anything ever happen to the coroners who said that these people just drowned? Did any of that get overturned?
No, to be fair to that coroner that had said that, he had listed his diagnosis as a temporary diagnosis.
Okay.
So it was like, based on what I'm given right now, all I can say is accidental drowning. But it was just that the DA ran with that as a full diagnosis.
Jeez.
And so it wasn't, to be fair, it wasn't really his fault. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So all Randy had to offer as his own defense were like really weak alibis and alternate suspects. So there were 2 other known, like, quote, freeway killers at the time that he was committing these murders, and that was Patrick Kearney and William Bonin. But their MOs were really different from his, so it was not a great defense because it was really easy to identify his, because the other 2 killers were not emasculating men, and
the burning is also really specific.
Yeah. And they weren't throwing them from moving vehicles either, so it wasn't like not the best defense. His defense team portrayed him as articulate, hardworking, and an upstanding, this is a quote, upstanding member of the community. What the hell kind of upstanding member of the community is arrested while drunk driving with a dead body in the passenger seat?
You can't really
Politician?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you can't
Like-
really explain your way out of that one.
Yeah.
No.
Way to be white. Way to be male. Bravo. Because, let's be honest, if he was black, they wouldn't have portrayed him as an upstanding member of the community.
No, they would shot,
if
they
he
would
was
shot him on
found.
sight.
Yeah. You know what I mean? After 13 months at trial, the closing arguments began April 29th, 1989, and lasted for 3 days. It was the most expensive trial in Orange County at the time, and the jury deliberated for 11 days before announcing that Randy Kraft was guilty of 16 counts of murder, 1 count of sodomy, and 1 count of emasculation.
I'm sorry about the count of sodomy. It's just so weird.
Yeah, I
Just
mean,
call
I
it rape then or something, but sodomy is a fucked
Yeah.
up charge.
But I think
I agree.
sodomy is if it's not, if it's a foreign body that's being introduced.
Nope.
It's
Sodomy
not-
was
No,
just
either?
it's just anal sex,
it is anal
Oh,
sex,
okay.
yeah.
which was illegal at some points in North America. So
It's still illegal in some states, actually.
I believe it.
But it's like, you know what? Everyone's into something.
Yeah.
But, I mean, sodomy as a law is ridiculous.
Yes, it is.
But I agree with what you're saying, Mike, is just call it rape, because that's
Yeah.
what it is. If it's not wanted, that's what it is.
Yep. It's kind of black and white.
Exactly. Yeah, so the jury came back on June 5th, 1989 to begin the penalty phase of the case, and this portion of the trial would last until August. Randy's defense team introduced testimony about a PET scan conducted on Kraft. They claimed it revealed frontal lobe abnormalities, and that this reduced his ability to control his emotions and impulse. And I'm like, what happened to your, I'm so innocent.
Yeah.
I'm an upstanding member of the community. And all of a sudden your case is that he can't even control his emotions, can't even control his impulses. Thought he was an upstanding member of the community.
Yeah.
But like all bullshit aside, there's 1,000 pieces of evidence or exhibits, whatever. And whatever the drunk driving charge is just whatever. That's,
Whatever.
Yeah,
Who
it's
cares?
pretty minor
Yeah.
compared to the rest of it.
Exactly.
Just explain why there's a dead body. Because to be fair, you just need one dead body. All of this extra, I don't want to say that it doesn't matter, but as far as his actual guilt, that's black and white. Explain that.
Exactly.
I think everything obviously should still be investigated, just so they can get closure for the victims, closure for the victims' families, and kind of have that honor for the victims to be recognized for sure. But that's just the simplicity of the victim that was found in his car with him.
You can quite literally charge him for that one first. And then after that one's through, charge him for all the rest.
Right.
You've already got him in prison and locked away, and then you can just pile on.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of what they did, right? Was they arrested him based on that and then gathered evidence on the everything else. But it's like the fucking gall of the defense team to say that he's an upstanding member of the community when he was found with a dead person in the passenger seat.
Yeah, that alone to me is...
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Unbelievable.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. There's no other word for it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so on August 11th, 1989, the jury passed the verdict of death. 3.5 months later, Judge McCartan formally sentenced Kraft to death. 11 years later, to the day, the sentence was upheld by the California Supreme Court. As of April of last year, he's still on death row in San Quentin.
Yeah, well, no one's been killed in California for a long time, right?
Yeah. Which I know Mike, you're against the death penalty.
Yeah.
So
I don't think any country should be murdering its own people, but that's just me.
So, but many believe that Randy must have had an accomplice. So how else would he be able to move a 200-pound body out of a moving vehicle without slowing down or swerving? So these men that were found with abrasions on their body of that could only conclusively be from being shoved out of a quickly moving vehicle, and no swerve marks of tires found. How could that happen? Unless there was two people involved, right? And there were 2 sets of footprints found at one of the crime scenes. So, how do you explain that? There were semen samples recovered in the Eric Church case that didn't match Randy, but there was evidence found that did match Randy, so someone else must have been there. Where did he get the photos that were found in his car developed? Because he didn't have any experience developing photos. He didn't have a dark room.
Yeah.
He didn't have anything like that. Someone must have had them developed. So, how?
Yeah,
there must be someone else involved.
And he's just been completely mum about it.
He hasn't said anything. He hasn't said anything about it. So the prosecution believed that Jeff Graves was the most likely accomplice, and when he was questioned after Randy's 1983 arrest, he told investigators, quote, I'm really not going to pay for it, And sadly, he died of AIDS July 27th, 1987.
Did they ever figure out why he picked the victims that he did? And, what he did to them was really sadistic and really scary. I mean, that's some, serious hate for men. Did they...
No, there's no mention of that. But, I mean, all I can think is that he was so arbitrarily dismissed from the military. So, and a lot of the victims were Marines.
Yeah.
That's the only connection.
I just feel like that level of
it's
torture,
really intense. It's
intensity,
really
yeah.
intense. Yeah, I know. There wasn't really any mention of that, but it's because he's not talking.
Yeah.
You know? He's not giving up anyone else. He's not giving up any other reason. He's just saying nothing.
It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. In 1991, journalist Dennis McDougall published a book about Randy called Angel of Darkness. In response, Randy sued the publisher in 1993 for $62 million in damages.
Wow.
In damages. Because he's damaged by the portrayal of what he did to all these people.
Right. Well, he claimed that the book smeared his good name, and that if he was released, it would make future employment impossible. And that it was all this guy's fault.
When you get hired...
Sorry.
When you get hired for a job, there's often the question of, do you have a criminal record? And you can't lie about that. So he's already lost that chance.
Right, but from his point of view, he would be getting out of jail because he would have been found not guilty.
Yeah, but he's guilty.
And because of this guy, he wouldn't be able to get a job after he was found not
It's
guilty.
a horror.
Yeah.
But that clearly shows you just a glimpse into his mind of how that's just a smokescreen. That's just bullshit.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I
For
mean,
sure.
I can maybe see a motive to try to sue for that kind of money so that he can maybe potentially hire new lawyers and have them try to look at his case and see if they can potentially get him out. Not that I ever think that's actually going to be a thing, but...
No, it's not. Yeah. It's not happening. So no shock. The lawsuit was dismissed by a California Supreme Court in June of 94. And in January 2000, small-time criminal Bob Jackson confessed to murdering 2 hitchhikers with Randy. So the first time was in Wyoming in 1975, and the second was in Colorado in 1976, and authorities were unable to corroborate either of these. But that didn't stop Dennis McDougall from publishing an article about it.
Of course.
So Bob also said that the scorecard only represented Randy's more memorable murders, and that the real number of his murders was much closer to 100.
Jesus Christ.
Dennis took this information to the police, and upon a further investigation, the police persuaded Bob to enter a mental institution. So no murder charges were filed, as there was literally no evidence at all that any of this had occurred. And yeah, that was the last mention I could find about Randy Kraft.
Wow.
He's still alive, and he hasn't been, his sentence hasn't been fulfilled.
It won't be either. California's not going to kill any more people.
No, I agree. Yeah. But yeah, that was the last mention. That was 19 years ago somehow.
Yeah.
I can't believe that, but yeah.
Well,
So
I'm glad his
that
scorecard is finished.
him. Yeah. Horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible person.
Yep.
That's it.
Definitely. Well, thanks for tuning in. You can find us on our website, brewcrime.com. You can go to Twitter or Facebook and search Brew Crime. You can go to our Facebook group at Brew Crime the Group. You can also find us on YouTube at Brew Crime, Instagram at Pacific Beer Chat, or any of the podcast apps. Thanks for tuning in.
Till next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Smell you later.
Bye-bye.
Here is a promo from one of the podcasts on the Michigan Sports and Entertainment Network.
Did you know that a man once jumped into a bulletproof window so much that he busted it out of the frame and fell to his death? I do. Hey, I'm Nicholas Howe, and I made an improvised comedy storytelling podcast about this death and many others. Using a multiverse of me's as the catalyst, I explore the various ways people have died. I also have special guests on and freak them out about how dangerous the world is. Did you know lakes can explode? You do now. Listen to the How Will I Die podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, and follow us on Twitter at HWIDIEPOD.
Now here is a promo from a fellow true crime, or spooky podcast that we really enjoy. Hope you'll take a listen.
It was a dark and stormy night.
Wait, why does it have to be dark and stormy?
Yeah, why can't it be daytime and clear skies?
Oh, for f***'s sakes.
Join us bi-weekly on Coast to Ghost as we take a trip cross-country digging up the ghost of your state.
Drinks are included and pants are optional.
You can listen to Coast to Ghost on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Are you ready to get spooked?
I just got that on mic. Wonderful. You ready?
Fuck yeah.
I thought you were going to reply with a bat or something.
Well, it's tea, so you can't really burp tea.
Well,
Well, you
I
could.
mean,
You can burp anything if you want to.
yeah.
You can do what you want.
I do what I want.
Ready?
Yes. Da.
Wait a minute. I think the duh was at the start of that. This is Mike.
No.
Maybe we should do that again.
No, that was Beck and I'm Nina. Welcome to today's episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just roll with that.
Okay. All
Cool.
right.
Cool.
This episode, we're going to do... What did we say we were going to call this again?
Games?
Games Crimes? I don't know. All right. Well...
This is smooth as sugar. Wow.
Yeah.
Is sugar schmoosh?
It's not. That's the point.
Is sugar
Sugar
schmoosh?
smoosh.
Okay.
Is sugar smooth? I don't know.
Should we start again?
I think so.
Okay, great.
But we should save that for later.
Life without murder for me is like a life for food without you. No, it's not. Hold on.
No, it's not.
Okay, strike that. Okay. Cool. Okay.
I can cut that doo-doo out.
Okay. The doo-doo?
Yeah.
Doo-doo.
Fuck your computer, Mike.
Could you keep it down? The Russian media wrote that Moscow was... Jesus.
Oh my god!
I'm so sorry, Nina.
Well, cool.
Oh my god!
Okay.
Wish we had video of that.
I guess he's awake now. Cool. So, let's do that again.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I only jumped out of my seat about 2 inches. It's fine.
Only peed yourself a little bit, right?
I'm gonna shit myself. It's fine. Anyways. Okay, let's start that again. What was the last thing you said?
Oh dear.
Cheers to the microphone.
What's with the wet farts?
They do sound like soggy farts.
Soggy farts.
Oh my god, I'm never gonna do that with my mouth again. That one sounded like beans. That was hearty. That wasn't a wet one.
I don't know. Beans would be a pretty wet one, I think.
I'm so tired.
Save. Shut up there.
I oughta.
Maybe start that sentence again. Fucking person upstairs.
Procedure to prevent the body from purging post-mortem. Nope, that's not right either.
Is that common when you
Totally.
drown for your head to pop off your body?
He had been given flurazumab. No, sorry. Randy, okay.
Sorry.
The aforementioned Scorecard... No, sorry.
Skull card.
Harsh
about from that.
fishing.
As the train goes by. Brr, brr.
Hold on. Look, it also puts the filter in Eminem's head.
Yes.
That's terrifying!
And my shirt. Look at my shirt.
Look at Nina's shirt.
He puts the filter on his face too.
How about this one?
Oh my.
Okay, let's finish this. We got, what, a couple more pages?
In Eric's case, it is possibly... No, it's not possibly. Fuck you, Mike.
Hot doggy dog.
Okay.